Welcome to Thrive in the Mess. I'm your host, Lisa Hutchcraft Whitmer. So, hey friend, welcome to Thrive in the Mess. I'm glad you're here today, and I'm thrilled to have my friend Annalisa with me, and we're diving into the topic of pornography. And Annalisa, I am so happy you're here. It's been a while, and I wish we could be together in person, but you know what? This is awesome to see you. And
Yeah.
why are we diving into the topic of pornography?
I am so grateful to just get to be a part of this with you. I really am very passionate about this subject because it greatly impacted my life, and I have just been watching it impact the lives of so many people in my generation and pretty much every generation, and it's just a very destructive thing, and I think it's really important for us to talk about it, and for people who have had experienced freedom and wholeness and healing in that area to be leading the conversation rather than that just really horrifying industry. So
Mm.
yeah.
And now some people might be like, oh, this topic, why is it so bad? It's just looking, it's not dangerous. Just can you speak to that?
Yeah, that's definitely a whole can of worms. Pornography is, for so many reasons, incredibly destructive. Um just to name a few things, a lot of people are introduced to it at very early ages, oftentimes accidentally. And I don't know that the number keeps going down, but the average age of exposure is very, very young, sometimes around like kindergarten age, probably a lot younger now with just the access that pretty much
Mm.
every child has to the internet, with like smartphones and stuff. And it really is just, I mean, the human mind and spirit is just not designed to consume content like that. Um, and it's such a twisted version um, of what God designed sexuality to be. And it informs people's worldview, how they see other people, how they interact with people, how they engage with like their own romantic partners. It's just there's just so many. It kind of covers every base of how it affects people's lives, because it's such a um, kind of body, soul, and spirit type of addictive
Mm.
type of content to consume. So I would say, to people who don't understand its harms, it really just kind of teaches sexuality in a way that can lead to people endorsing and being okay with like abusive behavior, dehumanizing people, like participating in acts that are, you know, like unthinkable, even at super early ages, which is one of the reasons that it's so harmful. I believe is because so many consumers start at such an early age.
Mm.
So pornography, therefore, is, I would say, almost entirely the sex education for most people, because that's really where they're experiencing any type of exposure to sexuality, um, is
That's
through,
a
yeah.
big quote.
Yeah, it's
Wow.
really, and
Wow.
honestly, it's, here's another reason that it's pretty harmful, beyond the scope of just our personal lives. But studies have shown, that pornography is, a lot of it is non-consensual. A lot of
Mm.
it contains underage people. I we can dive into all of this, but I've been pretty involved in kind of the conversation with legislation and pretty much just every type of angle you can come at, like taking this industry down. I've been just really passionate about it. So I've seen kind of the progression of understanding the connection that pornography has to human trafficking.
Mm.
Massive, massive, massive connection.
Wow.
And even like the New York Times released an article, I think in 2020, that talked about how many children were essentially being like filmed in pornography. And the largest porn site, I think it was called, the article is called The Children of Pornhub. And the
Mm,
largest porn site called Pornhub, overnight after that article was released about basically how a lot of pornography is non-consensual, contains like a lot of minors, and is really like connected to trafficking. Pornhub took down 80% of their content overnight. It was like
wow.
10 million videos, just
Oh,
because they knew that like
I can't comprehend 10 million anything,
no, I
but
know, yeah, yeah,
wow.
and that's just on
Oh.
one site. 80% of one site was 10 million videos, and that's just one of countless sites. Um, yeah, so I think understanding that not only does porn, like, harm you as an individual in consuming it, how it affects your brain chemistry, your relationships,
Mm,
just the connection to body dysmorphia, like, depression, like just mental health in general, but then also understanding that the industry is essentially this like multi-billion dollar industry is essentially
mm,
profiting oftentimes off of like the like sometimes the rape of children.
mm,
And so I think it's more harmful than just our own experience of it. It's actually the
mm,
industry itself is pure evil, and it's a
mm.
massive industry that's affecting lots of lives, and yeah, and is hurting a lot of people. So
So, Annalisa, you are obviously passionate about this. Why? Let's rewind and just jump into some of your story. Why,
yeah.
I, you know, you're passionate because,
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. So I have kind of an interesting story. I was raised in a Christian home, that kind of had some difficult dynamics to it. My mom was incredibly sick. Um, And which I don't know if I've told you about this, but my mom was, like, miraculously healed recently. This is just kind of a
oh,
sidebar, but
wow.
she is, like, a totally brand new person. It's like she's living for the first
That's
time.
been a long
And
time.
yeah, yeah. Now she's, like,
Wow.
fully herself again, which is a miracle. So
Wow.
awesome. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So awesome. Anyway, praise God.
Oh,
Um, but but yeah, my mom was really, we actually found out last year that she had had hydrocephalus, like, my whole childhood, like, really
oh,
bad. And she had Lyme's disease, and she also, she was on disability for depression because my dad was quite abusive, to her,
mm,
and she just kind of was unable to really do anything. Um, and then my dad was, like I mean, I love him to death. I think that it's such a complex thing because it's like we're all just doing the best we can with what we've been given, and
mm,
there's just this element of brokenness in the world that we live in that's really inescapable, and that kind of presented itself in my dad in um it just being a really difficult go growing up. There was a
mm,
lot of infidelity in my parents' marriage, and my dad had his own pornography addiction,
mm,
um, that I think kind of fueled his um, pretty intense like anger that he had, and would express towards us. So it's
mm,
kind of my home growing up was pretty volatile, abusive, just kind of scary, just kind of
mm.
confusing because we were also at church on Sunday. So I was like, what's that about? Like, I was so,
Not right, not
yeah,
matching up.
yeah,
Right,
not,
right.
yeah. And so I was just kind of like, who is this? Like, it sounds like Jesus is kind of the guy telling my dad how to live his life. And I am
Mm.
really not enjoying how that's going.
Wow,
So
right.
it was just confusing. And I honestly hadn't ever really, that I remember, ever really been explained like about the hope of Jesus growing up. It was more so just
Mm,
kind of the um like kind of going through the motions of being a church going family. Um so one of my first encounter with porn for myself, was I was 6 years old, and
Mm.
it's almost like a cliche story because so many people have it, but I had a neighbor, who had come over to play, and she's, I think, about my age too, and she came over, and we went into my parents' room, and she saw that there was a computer in there, and she somehow just it felt like in a blink of an eye, she just showed me gay pornography, 6 years
Mm.
old, and I was like I was scared. I mean, you can't even imagine, like, at that age,
At
I was
6,
confused,
yeah.
I was scared, I was like, "What are they doing to," like, I was just like, Turn it off." I She was just like, "Oh, it's funny, isn't it?" And I was like, "No, I'm terrified, like, I don't wanna see that,"
Right.
you know? And so that was my first exposure, and then I think that that kind of, like, cracked open the, like, what even is sexuality? What even how do
Mm.
I it just kind of opened that world to me, and which I just, don't think that that age is really the correct developmental moment to be thinking about
Right.
those things, so I just had a lot of confusion, and then that kinda juxtaposed with my dad's own, like, sex addiction was just a
Mm.
difficult thing to I was just like, "No one's telling me how to view this correctly. All I'm seeing is
Mm.
these perversions of it, but I don't know they're perversions because it's just my experience, and I'm just a little girl just looking to the world around me to teach me about life," and
Mm.
so I just kind of naively was just like, "I guess this is what that is," and, so then kinda fast forward, my parents got divorced, kind of in like an emergency. To spare all the details, my mom found evidence of another infidelity, and she just
Mm.
was like, "Even if the kids and I have to be homeless, like, we just can't stay
Mm.
here." So then we kind of sought refuge in we lived with my grandparents in Arkansas, and yeah, we packed up a minivan, and, like, we were all just kind of so disheveled. It was my mom and my brother, who's my only sibling, and
Mm.
I. And we got there, and I was just like, "Whoa." Like, I was 11, at that time, so it was like a perfect storm for me to be fully aware of what I was going through, but
Mm.
really not have the emotional wherewithal to understand how to process it, and I certainly didn't have any kind of, like, present healthy voices helping me walk through it. I just
Mm.
kind of had my own, like I just had to cope however just with
Well,
whatever I could find.
the adults in your life are having to deal with stuff on their own and
Tot
make their own way through
Yep.
everything going
Mhm.
on. So, yeah,
Yeah.
wow. That's a
Yes.
lot
Yeah.
on you to be walking through, like, just
Totally,
the
yeah.
whether it's the sexuality stuff you talked about,
Mhm.
and just trying to learn in life. No one's telling me about this,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then the strand of moving,
For
that
sure. Yeah.
upheaval, and your parents not being together, and just
Yeah.
all a mom who wasn't feeling well. So
Yeah.
that's a lot of
Yeah.
mess, going
Yes.
on
Totally,
for.
totally, yeah.
So you're 11 and
Yeah.
you moved. How did that go then?
Yeah. I mean, it was such a whirlwind. I remember being, because I mean, I grew up in a pretty abusive environment, so I was grateful to be out of that, but I was kind of
Mm.
left in the aftermath of, like, "Okay, what do I do now with," like, I don't know who I am. No one's ever told me what I'm worth. I've never, like I was just I mean, and you're kind of at that age, you're kind of starting to be like, "What's the world? Why are we here? Who am I?
Right.
Like, what's the point? What do I wanna do when I grow up?" You're kind of grappling with all those kind of existential questions. So I had that kind of on top of,
Right.
all of this pain. It was kind of like this lens of, like, just insurmountable pain that I was processing, like, the most important questions with.
Mm.
And so I was honestly just, like, so tormented. I was like
Mm.
I especially with my relationship with my dad was really tricky because I guess I kind of subconsciously, like, concluded that my value as a woman I looked to my dad to find out what my value as a woman was, and
Right.
according to
Mm.
his, his kind of practices in life, my value was, essentially my what I could provide sexually,
Mm.
because that's how he saw women. And so, yeah, so I kind of right off the bat, I don't even remember. It was all such a blur. But I don't remember the exact, like, how the events unfolded, but I remember pretty quickly just being like, "Oh, yeah, I remember my friend showing me pornography. That's the thing that my dad loves so much. Let's check it out, see if it'll, kinda
Mm.
soothe the pain a little bit." And so and all this time, I mean, I was just deep in a pit of self-hatred,
Mm.
um, so tormented. I was self-harming almost every day. I was
Mm.
so just despaired of life, honestly. And
Annalisa,
I
just for some people who might not be familiar with self-harm,
Yeah, yeah.
how did that play out for you?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much, I mean, it's kinda trigger warning, it's kinda dark,
Yeah.
but I pretty much how it looked for me was I would just go into my bathroom after school, and anything
Mm.
sharp I could find, I would just
Mm.
cut my arms. I would, um, just, hit myself, pull my hair out. I was just tormented. I was just like,
Mm.
and it almost was like a I almost felt, in retrospect, I'm almost like I could I could feel like now that my dad's not here to abuse me, someone's got to,
Oh,
type of thing. And my dad was
wow.
never physically abusive, but it was that kind of, just he was had a very, destructive type of way of
Mm.
interacting. Um, and so I feel like I kind of took over that role.
Wow.
Yeah, and so that kind of became my
Mm.
self-soothing routine, was self-harm and pornography pretty much on a daily basis.
Mm.
And, yeah, and then it started to affect how I started to really, I was like, "Wow, this is really all I'm ever gonna be good for, and I need to learn how to become, whatever that is, so that I
Mm.
can, since that's all I'm ever gonna be wanted for, I've gotta be
Oh.
someone's number 1 pick." And that was what I realized was kind of my deep wound with my father, was that I never felt like I would ever be his first pick. I felt
Oh.
like pornography and infidelity would always take place over me. And so I kind of always had this, I've just gotta be the most desirable. I've gotta be and I mean, I'm 11 thinking these thoughts. No,
Mm.
I was like participating in spelling bees, and,
Wow. Right.
I was just a kid, and I was just like, "How can I be the most sexually available and,
Wow.
desirable that I could be?" And so
Mm.
it affected my even just my view of myself so much, because, pornography displays this impossible standard,
Right.
for, what women should be. And I actually was reading this study, earlier, about this, scientist who he did this, he did this study where basically he did it with butterflies, and he had these male butterflies, essentially be put in the same place as these fake butterflies that were a lot more colorful than just the regular female butterflies. And
Mm.
it said that they were
Oh.
a lot more active with the fake ones that were, way more colorful and beautiful, and that when the
Oh.
females were reintroduced, they were, not it was like their interaction with them was so much less than it was when they had
Wow.
was just, regular butterflies. And so
Right.
I feel like that kind of, it's like that's kind of what porn does, is it creates this, standard. And that's why I feel like one of the many reasons it ruins relationships is because,
Mm.
and it ruins your ability to have a healthy, romantic relationship, because you just have this idea of what it should be, and then when you find out
Mm.
it's not that, then it's incredibly disappointing. And one of
It's a
my
fake colorful butterfly.
Totally, yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And not only that, but it's oftentimes, I mean, the things that that take place. I mean, praise God, I haven't watched porn in about a decade, probably more than that. No, probably like 12, 13 years.
Mm.
So I'm not up to speed on all the stuff.
Well, that's good to
Thank
know.
God. Thank God. But one thing that's fascinating to me is that Pornhub actually releases statistics every year,
Mm.
which is such a strange. I don't understand why they do it, but I'm grateful in a way that they do it. Because they'll release things such as, like who are the top users, how many hours were watched collectively,
Oh,
what are the most
wow.
searched like titles for videos, what are the
Mm.
most popular videos, and you
Mm.
would be horrified beyond
Mm.
belief at how much people are searching for minors and abuse,
Oh.
racism, incest. It's like the
Mm.
top of like what people are searching for is not consensual male, female, married. No one's looking for that.
Wow.
Everyone is looking for this because pornography, it affects your brain the way that drugs do.
Right,
So
right.
it
I've
affects
heard
your
that.
Yeah, so it affects your dopamine receptors. Once it's kind of the same concept as like the more you have it, the more you need. And the way that since, it's not like you can, like a substance, you can just take more of the substance. With pornography, you have to essentially, people oftentimes the type of content they're consuming gets more,
Mm.
um, tends to get more violent, more kind of just like
Mm.
really just, yeah. Just, I mean, you can imagine. I hope you don't even take the time to try to imagine, but
Wow.
it's horrifying the things that people are consuming. And then that becomes a standard. And I began to experience that in my own life as I was,
Mm.
quickly after the divorce, I was kind of just giving myself away to any guy who would give me the time of day. And
Mm.
the things that they would do to me and try to do to me, I'm like, in retrospect, I'm like, you probably should have been arrested for that. Like, I mean, they would do
Oh,
horrifying things to me.
wow.
And every time I was like,
Mm.
I knew it was because they saw it in porn. It wasn't because they came up with it. It's because they saw it in porn and
Mm.
that was the thing that they wanted. And they would perform those things. And not even, it wasn't even like they thought it was unusual because their
Mm.
sex ed was pornography. And therefore, what they saw, they just assumed, you know, they assumed it was normal. So,
And if no
um,
one else is speaking into that of
totally.
how God made sex to be enjoyed,
Yeah. Yeah.
then I really think that's a very astute observation you said earlier and tied into now of that's the sex education
Hmm.
that people are
Yeah.
getting
Yeah.
because a lot of people you just don't want to talk about it, you
Totally. Totally.
like it
Y-
came I think one of the first times Rick ended up talking to one of our sons was when we were having a Bible story, and it was about
Mm.
David and Bathsheba.
Oh,
So it's
no
like
way.
we're like, oh man, we weren't smart enough to skip
Uh
that
huh.
one. But
Totally.
the Bible is full of
Yep.
real people,
Yes.
real
Yes.
lives,
Yes.
and real issues.
Hmm.
And so, but you can give age appropriate as a
Totally.
parent,
Yeah.
to a child, not the whole
Yes.
spiel, but
Hmm.
incremental knowledge along the way. But
Definitely.
like you're saying, yours was not incremental.
Hmm.
You saw
Hmm.
something right off the bat.
Yep.
The
Yeah.
guys who, you were involved with and think, their sex education was from elsewhere. So
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah.
I've never quite thought of it that way. And
Yeah.
honestly, I've never thought of topics that, to
Hmm.
me, I guess I just don't know that much. And to know you think it's a certain thing, but like you
Hmm.
said, some of the things, topics get more violent and,
Right.
against people
Hmm.
due to their ethnicity,
Yeah.
even,
Yeah.
or, who they are. And so,
Yeah.
wow, that it's very
Yeah.
interesting they even release
I
information
know.
like that.
Yeah.
I would think
Yeah.
that's kind of surprising to me, but,
Uh-huh.
so, okay, you're 11,
Mhm.
you're trying to find your way in all this,
Mhm.
and there's a
Mhm.
strand that I wanted to mention that you talked about, your dad and just kind of his emphasis in his life,
Mhm.
of his focus, and you felt like you would not be first,
Mhm. Mhm.
that treasured feeling. And I cannot help but think of some of my favorite words in the Bible are in
Mhm.
Zephaniah 3:17.
Mm,
And
yes.
Zephaniah is just a fun word to say.
Yeah.
It's like, but literally it's talking about how God treasures us. He
Mhm.
like dances over us, sings
Yes.
over us. And
Yes.
I wish I could have told you that at age
Mm, yeah.
11,
Yep.
and said,
Yes.
Annalisa, just you're treasured, you're valuable.
Mm.
Because a lot of times that dad figure is, we begin thinking, like you even said, okay, well, my dad must be learning from Jesus,
Mm.
at
Mhm.
church, because then
Mhm.
he's acting like this, when that is the furthest thing from what
Mm.
God would say. Sex is a
Yeah.
beautiful thing, and
Yeah.
the way he made it and all. So it's interesting because that the way you saw your dad, so many people then think, well, God must be that way then.
Totally. Yeah.
And he's not.
Yeah.
That heavenly father, when we choose
Mhm.
to have a relationship with him,
Mm.
it's so different.
Yeah.
He is
Yeah.
our heavenly
Mhm.
father,
Mhm.
and a good father. And I remember hearing you sing years ago a song I caught singing about, how God is a good, good father.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
remember thinking at the time how beautiful that was
Mm.
because of some of your backstory.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you're 11, still
Mhm.
trying to find your way.
Mhm.
Take us along here. This
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
sad right now. This is hard to hear, is some of
Totally. Yeah.
this, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So I was kind of still in that. I was very you know that verse in Ecclesiastes that says that he has put eternity within the heart of man? I
Mm,
kind of was always like suspected that. I was kind of always like, there's no way I'm just here to pay my bills and then die. And then, like,
mm,
what's this all? Why are we all here? And what's this all for? I was kind of always asking those questions. And I noticed that a lot of my kind of self-medicating ways that I was living, such as like frequent pornography consumption, was really just kind of that a search for like, could this be it? Like, is the like,
mm,
I didn't know that I was what I was longing for was like true intimacy and like being fully known and fully loved and
mm,
being treasured. And I was searching for it in the most like opposite version of that, the most counterfeit
yeah.
version of that. um and I came to find like, wow, this really is not like, this isn't accomplishing anything. If anything, it's wounding me. And
Mm.
I kind of, in the midst of that, I was maybe like 13, and I went to a friend invited me to a First Baptist youth group in our little tiny town in Arkansas, and I went because of the invitation of free pizza.
Oh,
And
free food.
can you imagine how many people are going to be in heaven because of Little Caesars
Free
at youth
food.
groups? Um
That's funny.
but yeah, I mean, I'll be one of them. But yeah, I just went, and that was kind of the first time that I had heard about God treasuring me, and that
Oh.
God wanted to give and not take from me. And that was kind of such a foreign concept for me, because my perception of God was I'm just waiting for you to tell me the next thing you're mad at me for, or I'm
Mm,
just like trying to read your mind about who you want me to be and how you want me to live. And I know I'll never be enough. So then I'll always be ashamed. And then just this constant the thoughts that a lot of people deal with who really don't understand the heart of the gospel, who just kind of have this idea of
mm.
God as just this angry guy. And that was my first experience hearing. I actually heard Matthew 10, where or Matthew 11, I don't remember, where Jesus says, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I'll give you rest." And
Wow.
I was so heavy laden. I was so weary.
Oh.
And I was like, he wants to what? Like, what? And then like the songs that night were just about the love of God. And I just remember in that moment I remember consciously thinking, the search is over. Like
Oh.
I am I don't need to look anywhere else. Like this is what I was made for. This is what I'm alive for. And not even
Mm.
like this is the path for me and I think I'll try this out, but like this is this is it. Like
Mm.
this is it and I want the world to know, and I could just feel the Lord beginning this healing and just cleansing of my heart, and instilling in me identity where I had really tried to stuff that void um with value found everywhere but in the Lord. And yeah, that kind of really began my journey of understanding
Wow.
just my value to the Lord, um and how much he loved me in the power of the gospel. So
You know, I just sit here and I'm like, I feel like that night, just hearing you say it and seeing
mhm.
your expression, your countenance, your
Mhm.
face, I'm like, I feel like you got a big hug
Yes.
that
Yeah.
night almost.
Yes.
Just
Yes.
the way you and free pizza.
Yeah.
But I I love that because you needed that.
Mhm.
Annalisa at that age just needed someone, you needed that
Yeah.
hope,
Mhm.
some wow. And
Mhm.
what a thinker you have
Yeah.
been throughout your life.
Mhm.
Just you even questioning, is this going to be what fills this? And looking
Yeah.
for things
Yeah.
to fill that
Mhm.
hole in our heart, that's made for something more,
Yeah.
made that
Yeah.
only God can fill.
Mhm.
So, okay, you found some hope that night.
Mhm.
I'm guessing everything isn't just magically perfect then.
Totally, yeah.
When
Yeah,
we
it
know
was
God, it's not perfect.
yeah,
It's
yeah, which
like
I think that that's such a beautiful thing to bring up because it really is like everyone's story is so different. And
Mm,
I kind of had I had reached such a point of I can't do this anymore. Nothing's working. I just
mm,
don't like what really is it? Like what am I here for and what's really going to satisfy me? That really when I heard about the love of Jesus, it was such a kind of miraculous turnaround for me. It wasn't perfect at all, but I
mm.
just remember even like my it was just like things just kind of had no like, you just start to see that it's almost like everything else is black and white and Jesus is color, and
Oh, wow.
you're just like, why go back to the I don't know. Like,
Wow.
I think, one of the verses I was thinking about, is one of my favorite verses, Psalm 16, um, 11, that says, "In your presence is fullness of joy, at your right hand are pleasures forevermore."
Mm,
And that was kind of my experience was I was like, oh, the pleasure I've been searching for and the intimacy, the joy, the hope, the love, the feeling cherished, the belonging,
mm.
that I've met the man who has all of that at like with absolute unending measure. And so I honestly I wouldn't say I mean, I know some people's stories like I got saved and then I just still couldn't kick all the things. And for me, I mean, it wasn't like a immediate turnaround, but I was just kind of like I was looking in the wrong places and then I found the right place and
Mm.
I just didn't need to go back to the wrong place, you know? And obviously I had
Wow.
imperfect moments, but I just didn't, I just knew I think I was so resolute about it because I had been searching so hard for so long.
Mm,
Um and then that kind of was coupled with as I started to learn about I started to kind of like reflect on how pornography affected my family and
mm,
then how it affected my life, and I just started to kind of look into like this is such a like this is kind of taking over my generation because I was kind of in
mm,
that Jordan and I were kind of in that generation that are like in like middle school we didn't have smartphones, but then by high school we kind of did. So we kind of were like the last generation that didn't like we were never iPad toddlers,
right, right.
like we just didn't have those at that point. So then as the progression happens and kind of every kid just has a screen whenever they want, I was just like,
Mm,
porn is taking over. Like it's no longer really it doesn't seem like there's a question of like, do you watch it? It's kind of like, what kind do you watch? How often do you watch it? And
mm,
so I just started to, look into it. And then very quickly I started to see the connection that it had to trafficking and just kind of how evil the industry was. And that kind of further put like I can't participate in this. On my worst day, there's no way I can't stomach knowing that I'm potentially watching someone literally get like raped right now. Can't do it.
Mm.
And
Mm.
yeah,
Wow.
so that was kind of a quick journey of just um like kind of like a clean breakup of I was
Mm.
just like I'm either in or I'm out, and this I can't be in and justify this being in my life.
Wow. That's a lot in there. And it is really true that, I know I've heard someone my age where they walked away from they had there was a group of I think like middle school boys,
Mm,
and someone said, "Look what I brought from home," and it was a magazine.
mm,
And that one guy, the story that I'm familiar with, turned around and walked away. They didn't know
mm,
what it was,
mm.
but they're like, "This doesn't seem
Yeah, yeah.
good," like,
Mhm,
just because it's they're like, "Ooh," just kind
mhm.
of that when people are like, "Oh, look," whatever.
Yeah.
And it was different. It
Mhm,
wasn't, I think then from, it would have been, pornography would have been more in certain places, but you're
mhm,
right. Then all of a
mhm.
sudden there's a generation
Right,
where we have phones to stay in touch, but the internet's right there. And
right.
I actually have heard some stories where they literally take the internet part off their phone
Mhm.
when they're like, I don't want
Yep.
to have the possibility of watching pornography again
Right.
when they've said I don't want to.
Mhm, mhm.
And so, I'm like, whoa, that's extreme to
Uh-huh.
like take the
Yeah,
internet off. Like,
yeah.
how do you find where you're going to pull over for a restaurant while
Totally, yeah.
traveling, or,
Uh-huh.
things like that. So, but I fully respect that
Mhm.
decision.
Yeah,
That's,
yeah.
practical
Mm,
thought that has helped them.
mhm,
But so you are passionate about saying, "Hey, I like you were exposed to this at a young age,
mhm,
at
mhm.
6 years old, and
Yep.
like you said, a lot of times it's accidental. It
Mhm,
was
mhm,
accidental for you.
mhm.
So, what are some practical tips even for a family, a parent, or even a child? I
Yeah,
kind of want to
yeah.
look at the different things, but a child isn't necessarily listening to this, but
Totally.
what are some things that can kind of, just some thoughts from you on all that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's lots of things I would say. I think coming to term with the fact that if you are a parent and you have a child, um, that like sexuality is a part of how God has designed us, and it's a God-given thing. And so I feel like sometimes it's kind of like I don't know totally because I'm not a parent, but it almost is like parents don't want to acknowledge that their kids are gonna, their sexuality is gonna develop. So it's almost like let's not talk. Like if we don't talk about it, then it's not even there. I don't even want to think about it.
And
Um,
that's how they were born to begin with, was because
yeah, right. No, exactly.
because
Yeah,
it's like
exactly.
Rick and I joke, we're like, well, how did that happen?
Yeah, exactly.
And
That's
yet then we
Lisa.
don't want
You're
to
so
talk
funny.
about it.
That's
It's
so funny.
like
Yeah. So I think just like it starts in the home
Mm,
and pornography and just I would say the larger just kind of what I call like pornified culture, not
mm,
always just directly porn sites, but like movies and
mm.
social media. It's just kind of everywhere. It's going to inform your children. We just live in a world where it's kind of inescapable unless you want to you know, live on an island in the middle of nowhere with no internet and never talk to anyone ever again. This kind of
Possibility
inescapable.
of that.
Yeah, I know. It sounds kind of nice, honestly. Um, but so I would just say like the conversation just like has to happen and creating a safe environment for your kids to talk about what they're experiencing
Mm,
with their friends, what they're seeing, what they're hearing, and kind of talking about. Unfortunately, the conversation is becoming a necessity at younger ages. So I think that
right.
just the age appropriate bringing it up um and just having it be an open conversation. And I
Mm,
think that people are starting to understand that, like, believers really should be leading the conversation in teaching healthy sexuality, because,
mm,
like, we've been given the model, like God has given us the model of healthy sexuality. And um so being able to teach that is so important in the home. Um, Another thing that I would say, I mean, there's definitely practicals. A couple of resources that I really love. One of them is an organization called Fight the New Drug. They talk a
mm,
lot, they educate a lot just about the effects of pornography, what it does to your brain. Just that helped me a lot in the, because there is, like, like the website blockers and stuff like that. But I
mm,
think getting to the deeper heart issue of understanding how harmful it is, and what the industry is like and stuff like that, really helped me be motivated to just, you know, not participate. There are definitely, software that you can, like, put on your phone. I think, like, Covenant Eyes is one of them that I've heard a lot about. I think there might be a couple more. um, and yeah, I think just being in a community of people where you can really bring, um, all
mm,
of your stuff, and, like, in a biblical way. And, like, I know the book of James says, confess your sins to one another, pray for one another, and you'll be healed.
mm,
And I think the purpose of confession, according to that verse, seems to be healing, not shame. Like, it's never, like, confession is
mm,
always for the purpose of becoming more whole and more,
mm,
close to Jesus. So I feel like having a group of safe people that you can be accountable to, and just to open the conversation and share, like, where you're at with, I think is really massive. One practical thing that I am praying is going to be coming into effect soon.
mm.
To make a long story longer, there is this Supreme Court case that is about to be, it's actually about to be decided this month.
Mm.
But I got to be, oh, another organization that I love is called Exodus Cry. They primarily bring, like, awareness to, like, the world of human trafficking. They've been doing a lot of things with, like, legislation for
Oh.
pornography and stuff recently as well. They cover a lot of stuff. They're just incredible, incredible people.
I have to
But
say, personally, I feel really badly. I have not really made the connection between pornography and human trafficking.
oh yeah,
It's just
girl.
something I haven't really thought
Mhm.
of.
Yeah,
And so that's
yeah.
that's really something
Massive,
to
yeah,
hear
massive
about
connection.
that. So thank
Yeah.
you for even
Yeah.
raising my awareness with that,
Totally,
you
yeah.
know.
I would say if you wanna learn more about that, Exodus Cry would
Mm,
be a massive resource. They
wow.
did a whole campaign called Trafficking Hub, where they were
Mm,
essentially exposing, like, how a lot of pornography, especially on Pornhub, is in fact trafficking. Um,
wow.
which, yeah. And then that ended up having massive repercussions on, like, porn sites taking things down. A bunch of major,
Wow.
like, credit card companies made it impossible to use their cards on those sites.
Oh, wow.
Just some really big breakthroughs happened because of that. But one of the things that Exodus Cry has been doing is, because when you think about, like, people are just like, "Oh, don't you just wanna, like, if you give your kid a phone, just make sure that there's a porn blocker thing on it." And that's a great thing, but also it's like, when we were at this Supreme Court case essentially determining if it's constitutional to have age verification laws put in place so that you'll be
Oh.
legally required to verify your age through a third party in order to access any website with 30% or more pornographic content on it.
Wow, I'm
Um,
trying to track what you just said. So
uh,
verify your age through a
yeah,
third party. I don't even understand what
yeah,
like how that would play out.
totally, yeah. So it's technically not legal for minors to view pornography,
Right, right.
but the way they enforce that is click here if you're 18 or older. And then that's it. So,
Oh,
essentially, with age verification laws, what they would be doing is you would have to verify your identity, through a third party, and, the technology is all in place for it to be safe, and,
wow.
so that they're
Wow.
not they're not keeping your information, they're dumping it as soon as they verify your identity. but you have to verify if you're 18 or older to access those sites.
Mm.
And so the there's been, I think at this point, 19 states that have enacted age verification laws, and they've seen pornography
Mm.
usage go down dramatically, which is
Wow.
incredible. But one of the states was considering putting that in that legislation, and it was Texas, and they essentially came up with this whole case that it's against the First Amendment and it's not constitutional to have age verification laws for minors to access
Mm.
porn, which is totally like,
Mm.
what? It's illegal, so what? Anyway, they're just,
Mm.
it's completely unfounded argument. But when we got asked by Exodus Cry, because I'm going to be in a documentary with Exodus Cry about um how pornography affects women, which is incredible,
Oh,
like such a huge honor, cuz Exodus Cry is like the
wow.
leading, like, the sexual exploitation industry documentary. Like, they've released some films, like
Wow.
they're one of their most famous ones is called Nefarious, and it kind of explains human
Mm.
trafficking, and that's where a lot of people kind of got their initial introduction to what trafficking was.
Mm.
So we're gonna do this documentary, and then they asked the girls who are gonna be a part of the documentary if they would come to Washington, D.C. for this court case of Texas saying that it's not constitutional to have age verification laws.
Oh.
Um, and so we gave some speeches in front of the Supreme Court as at the press conference before the oral arguments for that case.
Did you
And
share some of your story?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it was awesome. And
Oh,
right before I went up,
wow.
this was like one of the greatest moments of my life. Right before I went up, someone leaned over to me and was like, "Hey, the CEO of Pornhub is standing right behind you." And I was like, "He's about to hear my speech." It was awesome. Yeah, it was so cool. It
Wow.
was so
Did you
cool. Yeah.
happen to share, like, I can't help but think if there had been something in place like that,
Mhm.
your neighbor, friend who
Mhm.
came over and
Yep.
exposed you to clicked a few buttons on the computer,
Mhm.
she would not have been able to do that, and
Yeah.
you would not
Yeah.
have been
Totally.
exposed at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, that was kind of my punchline, because I talked in my speech about how I had
Punchline. Is that the right word?
I was like well, when I kind of explained to my dad when I was like maybe 17 or something, I kind of said, "Hey, here's the effect of everything that happened. Here's how my life kind of played out and how
Wow.
this destruction was brought into my life." And all he had to say to me afterwards was, "And no one was there to protect you?" And I was like,
Oh.
"Nope." And so in my
Mm.
speech, I was like, we have an opportunity to legally protect these children.
Oh.
Because and what they were saying in the oral arguments, which kind of brings me back to like having porn blockers on phones. It's a great thing, but it's like in the oral arguments, they were saying like, but like what middle-aged person do you know is more tech savvy than their 15-year-old? Like
Mm.
there's ways around all of that. And if
Right.
and if you just put, if you just put a filter on your teenager's phone, like there's just going
Mm.
to be ways that they can access it. Um and I mean, they even brought up how I think it's Pinterest, where it's like you can put blockers on all of your like internet apps, but if you
Mm.
go on Pinterest, you can access the internet um, like, in a way that
Oh.
isn't connected to those filters. So you can just go on Pinterest, open a site, and then find porn there. Um,
It really
so
seems like where there's a will, there's a way.
totally, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
like, I hand my phone to my like, my,
Mhm.
Gen Z age
Yeah.
young, my
Yeah.
children, because they're good with that sort of
Yep.
thing. Or
Yep.
I call them or text them or
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
because 'cause they're not always there to hand it to, but, like,
Uh-huh.
a lot of, adults do that. "Hey, can you
Totally.
help me with this?" So,
Yeah. Yeah.
wow. So,
Yeah.
yeah, to find end arounds. Wow. I have a question I wanna jump back to
Mhm.
also. When you said, how I talked about you being involved in this documentary, how do you feel like porn affects women?
Oh, I mean, massively. I think Um, it's a very taboo topic because people kind of
Mm.
think of porn as like the guy's issue. So pornography use
Mm.
with women is very rarely talked about. Um, so I think that there's just very little support for women who are experiencing that. But then kind of on the other hand, it's just the way it informs women's sexuality and kind of their worth as a woman, as a
Mm.
sexual object, essentially, um, it is, yeah, it's just very alarming how women are depicted and how women are kind of taught to behave and perform and what they are to accept. And I mean, I was like taught that being abused sexually was like something I should love and enjoy. I was
Mm.
taught that by pornography. So I think that yeah, I mean it greatly affects women from everything from just their own body image to um their self-worth and what they believe they're useful for in this life. And
Mm.
yeah, it's just really, really
It's a
destructive.
lot of layers. And
Yeah.
how I know you're not a man, but with you have been involved in just even helping in this area. What's your take on how pornography affects men? Like you kind of said that earlier when I know you can't speak for a man, but even when you were 11 and involved and 12 years old, and seeing the impact you experienced personally of those young men who
Mhm.
had experienced pornography
Yeah.
and how that played out affecting you then. But what's your take on that even?
Yeah, I think it kind of informs the narrative that masculinity is kind of like equal to someone's like sexual
Mm.
um I guess, like, I don't know if you've it's kind of vulgar, but, like, the body count, it's kinda like how, how
Mm.
many women, how much how many girls can you get? And, like, it
Mm.
kinda becomes this, like, badge of honor, for men to just kind of have, um, kind of meaningless sexual encounters with people, which
Hookup
I th
culture.
totally, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's one of the saddest things is that when you look at God's original design for men and masculinity, it's such a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I
Mm.
feel like pornography is one of the primary things that distorts it because it just fuels um so many like pornography is kind of like the starting point of so many um like expressions of like the connection that it has to like anger issues and infidelity and depression. And it really kind of just like it kind of just it not only does pornography kind of dehumanize women, it also in another way dehumanizes men because it kind of makes them out to be just these sex consumers that all they can do is just
Mm.
that's kind of they're just almost like yeah, they're just kinda taught that that's what their lot in life is,
Mm.
um, in kinda in a similar but different way to women. Yeah, and it just the identity of the God-given identity that, the God purposed men to have is so opposite of how pornography affects
Mm.
the minds and hearts of men.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, and it's really connected to, yeah, how men treat women, how the connection to it just can really escalate behavior to be, sometimes harmful, and it just is so sad that it's consumed so many people. So,
Annalisa, how in the world do you not view men as on the take,
yeah,
not faithful?
yeah,
Just a lot of the things you said, the opposite of what, masculinity is. And how do you do that? What would you say to someone right now who's like, you know what? I'm done with men. I don't want this. I've walked a similar path as
mm,
Annalisa. How do you how how do you help your heart with that?
yeah, I mean, like, all I can really do is just say, like, "God, when you dreamed up this person,
Mm.
what was in your heart for how you created him?" And, like, what I even just looking through the Bible at men, um, in their moments of just being so alive in how God designed them,
Mm.
they're, like, just fierce protectors and leaders and, like, tender-hearted um, and care deeply for their families um, and are creative and hardworking. And, you just look at all these beautiful, beautiful qualities of like when a man truly is as he was designed, it's
Mm.
like one of the most unstoppable things. And
Yeah.
so when I have that temptation, I mean, obviously, like, unfortunately, it's not like every man is functioning fully in how God designed him to be. And, it's not, you know, some people are not, necessarily, it's not like I just open myself up to anybody and believe that at best all the time about everyone.
Mm.
But um, I think just asking the Lord, like, who is this person to you, and what do they mean to you, and what was your original design for who they are? Um, and
Wow.
yeah, like godly masculinity is such a beautiful thing. And um
That's a
and that's
powerful perspective
yeah,
to
yeah,
like think of what and see someone trying to say, okay, how would God view this person almost
yeah,
in a
yeah,
way? And
yeah,
yeah, because I know it's real easy. There's a lot of songs out there even about, just kind of having a hard heart to,
mhm,
guys or
mhm,
just because of the hurt. It's fully
totally, totally,
understandable
yeah,
because the hurt is very real and it leads to not great situations, how you view yourself and self-harm, so many things that you talked
totally.
about, or looking for love in different places and that value. So, wow, what would you tell 11-year-old Annalisa?
Mhm. I would say, um, I would just say that everything that you're searching for can only be found in Jesus. And he's not like you think he is, and he's full of love. Um, and he's the source of the healing and the wholeness and the satisfaction that you've been craving your whole life. And that he isn't the one who caused the pain to happen to me. And
Mm.
yeah, and that there's abundant life available in him.
Wow, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
Oh man, and I something that really jumps out to me in that is you saying he's not who you think he is.
Mhm.
That 11-year-old Annalisa thought Jesus was different
Mm.
because of how he had been represented
Yeah.
to you,
Yeah.
but people don't always represent Jesus
Mm.
for who he
Right.
authentically
Yeah.
is. And um well, what would you tell someone right now walking through this? They're in the middle of self-harm
Mm.
or relationship after relationship and they're hurting, how what would you say to someone with all that?
I would say that the heart of God is not indifferent towards you, and
Mm,
is he draws near to the brokenhearted, and it is his joy and his pleasure and his desire to come close to those who are hurting and who are in need of him. And that the Holy Spirit, one of the names of the Holy Spirit is the helper, and he loves to help. He loves when we need him, and he loves to give us everything we need. Um, and there's hope, and in Jesus, like, freedom is completely available and is possible, and so is healing. And not only on the surface of, you know, the things you do or don't do changing, but at the core level of, what are you actually searching for? Why are you doing it in the first place?
mm,
Like, those answers and that satisfaction you're looking for is really only found in Jesus. Um, and he wants to give himself to you. He's not far off. He's not trying to be hard to find. He made himself
mm,
available, and through the cross and through the gospel, you can have access to him, you can have as much of him as you want,
mm.
and you can be a friend of God forever and be healed and whole. So,
Wow, lots of words of hope there. And what would you say to someone they're like, big deal, this isn't affecting me and
mm,
pornography, like it helps my relationships
mhm,
or
mhm.
it's what would you say to, someone who's just like, what is the big deal with all this?
Yeah. I would probably look at them like this and be like, "Really? Really? Because I just deep down,
Mm,
like, people who are in the depths of such a destructive, um, practice and, like, way of life and thinking, like, they're not at peace. They're not truly
mm,
fulfilled. They know it. Even if they're in denial, like, they know that they haven't, that they're not whole and um,
mm,
that what they're going to, it may be working, kind of like the analogy of, like, junk food will keep your stomach full, but it'll probably kill you eventually. So, like, like, if you're looking for nourishment in the wrong
mm,
places, like, I mean, even people who are just kind of like just kinda wanna take the kinda spiritual, emotional side out of it and just be like, "Don't really care about that, I like to do it." The studies are really clear that pornography use and just you know, the sexualization of people and the dehumanization of people um, through kind of what the pornified culture has taught us and how to view people
mm,
is incredibly destructive to your brain cells, to your own sexual health, to your relationships with people. It's just very clear that it's a super destructive, thing to consume. So
mm.
I would say I don't think anyone's really fooling themselves if they think their life is great with tons of porn in it. So
Wow.
yeah.
Well, and I read an article, I might not get it quite right, but it was a couple or so years ago. It was actually a public high school that had some discussion group with students and talking about pornography and how it affects people, and just some of the things you're talking about, the rewiring the brain,
Mhm,
how it led them to begin to view women um, very differently
mhm.
and even violently,
Yep.
or some of the anger things you talked about.
Mhm.
And there was, and this was a public high school, just
Mhm.
they were
Wow.
discussing this issue. And I thought it was very interesting just to hear some of the scientific
Mhm.
things that they were
Yeah.
discussing, but
Yeah.
then also from a young person's perspective of how it had affected them emotionally
Mm.
and why they were choosing not to
Mhm.
pursue,
Mhm.
having pornography be a part of their life,
Mm.
because they saw
Mhm.
the impact it was beginning
Right.
to have on them.
Yep.
And I thought that was just very
Mhm.
intriguing. I
Yeah.
literally have heard that scientifically, sometimes they say it can rewire the brain, like
Mhm.
cocaine, when you
Yeah.
use
Yes.
something
Yeah.
like that. I don't know
Yep.
if that's I heard that from someone else with who they've walked through that in their marriage, even
Yeah.
just kind of the
Yeah.
rewiring, and yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, Fight the New Drug has a lot of those, studies out that actually explain
wow.
all of that, and yeah, they explain, like, how our dopamine receptors work, how we
Mm,
once our dopamine receptor is activated, then we'll kind of do anything we can to get more of that thing as fast as we can,
wow.
and so it is addictive, and pornography not only is addictive, but it's unlike any other substance because it's like, in the instance of cocaine, it's like once you're out of cocaine you're not high anymore. But with pornography, you can just be like, "Oh, I'm visualizing that video I saw yesterday," and you can almost relive the high in your imagination. And so it's kind of
Mm,
like and it's in everyone's pocket. You just need internet access. So much
mm.
it's almost entirely free. I mean, people almost never pay for porn. The average, teenager
Really?
doesn't really pay for porn.
Oh.
I mean, and then there's the whole talk of sites like OnlyFans, and it's really just kind of a
Mm.
horrible situation of how accessible it is.
What is
Um,
OnlyFans? Is that a pornography site then, or?
Essentially, from what I understand, I probably need to research it more because of how passionate I am about this, but I haven't wanted to research it because it's
Right,
so disgusting.
right,
But from
right.
what I understand, it's essentially like you can kind of like subscribe to certain users that'll make like pornographic content, like
I see.
for
So it's
for
free.
whatever
I
you
never knew
that
about
that
that.
one isn't
Right,
free.
right.
That one you kind of like have to pay. I guess
Okay.
you like pay for kind of what you want. Um,
Mm,
and which is just yeah, just a horrible thing. But a lot of people,
mm.
a lot of like social media influencers have OnlyFans because people are a fan of their social media and want to see a little bit more. So then, you know? So
Oh,
it's a and it also is a way for, like,
wow.
people to
Okay.
make money, so it's, like, a lot of people yeah, so
Right. I
it's
never realized that. I
yeah.
feel badly. I haven't
No,
really
I know, I honestly don't know a
been
ton
as
about it either
aware,
'cause I just don't wanna, like I just don't even wanna dive into it, but, yeah, that's a really
Right.
big thing right now, so
Well, and that's totally understandable.
Mhm.
So, what are some final thoughts you would just share with someone? They're like, I was exposed when I was young.
Mhm.
I, you know, what are some things you would even just share to someone right now?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, I would just remind people there's no condemnation for those who are in
Mhm.
Christ Jesus, and, um and condemnation is not from God, um, and God wants to, in his kindness, bring the verse, like, "His kindness leads us to repentance," like, in his love wants to bring freedom in your life, um, and because I know the shame cycle of you especially as a Christian, it's like you watch porn, you're super ashamed, you kinda put yourself in condemnation jail for 3 days, and then you feel like you've done your time and can go back to God, and then you just the cycle repeats, and, it's just a much larger issue than what you do or don't do, and God is after making your heart whole, not making you a non-porn consumer, He's more concerned with
Mm,
healing you from the inside out, um,
mm.
so I would just say there's hope for that, and there's, like, communities all over the place if you're not plugged into, like, a local, like, body of believers to just walk with you through all of that, then, like, I would encourage you to, and there really is, like, freedom is totally possible, and it's available, like, in the Lord, and there's yeah, just lots of resources out there um, that can help you just get free so that your life can be abundant.
Wow. Well, and I love how you've shared community has
Mm,
been so important and some of these other helps and things. And just I so appreciate your passion even. You're a great wound, when you were 6 and just all the different strands of, whatever it is of your parents' divorce, knowing porn was big to your dad and seeing that and even that kind of gave you a connection with him it seemed you
mhm,
said early
mhm,
on and
yeah,
part of why you got interested in that
mhm,
and, just all the things, but now you're passionate about saying, "Hey, can we try to not have this exposed to,
mhm,
minors?" So
mhm,
thank you for
mhm,
your passion,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I know you pour into people's lives in other ways too, just
mhm,
sharing the hope that you have found that,
mhm,
if anyone is looking for that kind of hope and that kind of relationship with God, you've heard Annalisa talk about it. It is her hope, as you can tell, and it's not just a pat answer of, yay, everything's better and life is hunky dory, but it really is a daily hope of when that sin you talked about earlier, that middle letter I, choosing
mhm,
to live life my way, not God's way. And my way has consequences and God's way does not. And if that's a relationship you're interested in, all you have to do is turn to God and say, "Hey, you're my only hope.
mhm,
I'm sorry for this stuff. I don't want to drive my car anymore. I want you to drive, God, and I'm done living my way. I want to live your way." And Elisa, I just thank you for even sharing your hope with that and
yeah,
how
of
that
course,
relationship, just finding what your heart was longing for
yeah,
in that
yeah,
relationship
yeah,
with
of course,
Jesus is
yeah,
powerful. Oh
yeah,
my goodness.
the gospel
So
is powerful.
well, and now your life is just I love seeing just your joy and your
Mhm,
radiance and just all the things. So,
love you, Lisa.
wow. Oh, love you. Thank you for being here. Big
Yeah,
hearts
of
to you.
course,
And any final thoughts?
um, I always say Jesus is better than anyone ever told you, and there's just so much hope in him, and the gospel is truly power.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Annalisa, thank you for being here and just sharing so
Yeah,
much hope through all this and being open and honest with your story. And
of course.
friend, I really hope that you'll come back and join us next time on Thrive in the Mess.